Well, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for watching. Last year, we had a terrible drought. I can tell you that in the 30 plus years that I've been at this property, I've never had bare spots like this as a result of lack of rain. Normally, we have the ability to water. I do have a sprinkler system, but we were on a true lockdown when it comes to watering restrictions. So my lawn took a beating for the first time in 30 years. And although each year there's repairs that need to be done and bare spots and isolated problems, I had a I had a bunch of them to look forward to this spring, and I'm just going to show you how I handled some of those. Essentially, what you're looking at in this photo is bare spots that were created by grass going dormant and just not surviving the fact that we had 100-degree and 95-degree days, along with the fact that it just didn't rain for seemingly 2 months. And once they stopped watering, some of it just didn't make it. All right, I guess we all know that there's 100 or more ways to reseed a bare spot, and most of them are ineffective, and I've certainly tried most, if not all of them. But through trial and error, I've come up with what I believe is a solution, and I've figured out a few tricks on my own, and I'm sure a million other people have come up and created this same solution. But if you haven't, hopefully this will be something that will be useful for you to use going forward. All right, only a few tools or requirements needed for this job. Wheelbarrow is one of them. Shovel is another. I throw on some gloves if you don't like getting your hands dirty or blisters. And a strong back is kind of essential for parts of this project. My back's definitely not as strong as it used to be, but somehow we made do. Okay, the next thing we're going to need is some soil. So when it comes to soil, in this kind of project, you really don't have to use the best that's available. However, I would suggest that you use something that's reasonably rich in nutrients and as pliable as possible. During the season and at the end of each season, I'm always creating compost piles. My compost piles are in the woods and they don't get a lot of sun, so admittedly, my compost is average at best. However, it's certainly good enough for this job and it saves me a lot of money. I'm not buying the soil, and it also saves me a trip that I don't have to make, or multiple trips that I don't have to make to a store. If you don't have a compost pile, the best solution would be bags of compost or garden soil from your local nursery or box store. That's what I'd recommend. However, if it's a big job, screen loam delivered would be great. The benefit of screen loam as well as the bag stuff is the bag stuff and the screen stuff both have been obviously screened. No glass, no pebbles, no sticks, things of that nature. Just makes it a lot better, and it's just nice, workable soil. All right, I guess this next one's pretty obvious. You're going to need some grass seed. I recommend you go with a good quality grass seed. Jonathan Green has been a good product for me. I've used it for probably about 6 or 7 years now, and I'm very pleased with their quality. You can see because the price is right on the bag. That is a big bag, but obviously it's not cheap. So depending on how much you need, you might not need a bag the size that I purchased, but I do suggest don't get a cheap bag. Get good grass seed. Okay, this is where some of the magic begins. Essentially what I do is I will fill the wheelbarrow with, I shouldn't say fill, I will begin to fill the wheelbarrow with 6 or 7 shovelfuls of the compost, or depending on what you're using, you could just dump a bag into the wheelbarrow. And then what I do is, like a salt and pepper shaker or like a flour sifter, I just start sifting all sorts of grass seed into the wheelbarrow. I make sure that I'm not conservative with it. I don't cheap out. I definitely put a lot of grass seed in because what I'm trying to do is get a lot of coverage. Once I get that first layer in, I grab the shovel, I use my hands, and I just start from the bottom of the wheelbarrow up, just mixing it, mixing it until I get to a point where when you look at the soil, it looks like there's no grass seed again. Grab that shovel again, add some more compost, soil, grab another bag of soil, whatever, however you're doing it. Get it to the point where you sufficiently covered that last layer. You're creating a new layer. And then once you created that new layer, get that bag of grass seed out again and start sprinkling. From there, you're just going to grab that shovel again and or your hands and just start mixing. And you're going to move from the bottom up to top, and then you're going to add some grass seed again, add some compost again, rinse and repeat. I continue this process until basically the wheelbarrow is full or full to the point where it's not too heavy for me to push it around the yard. Not going to be any good if we can't move it. Throw the shovel in the wheelbarrow and head out to your first spot that needs some help. The photo here is basically showing you an area that I've completed, and essentially the way that I do it is I get over to each spot. If it is a spot that looks like it's intermingled with the grass, but it's not like a big open spot, I put the soil in my hand with the seeds and I sift it almost like going through a flour sifter. You just let it drop into that spot. If it's an actual pretty good spot, I either use the shovel or my hands, depending on the size, and I just dump it in that spot. After putting it there, though, what I do is I get on my hands and knees and essentially like waxing the car or just rubbing something in. I kind of rub it into the soil, that's under it and the grass that's around it, just making sure that I cover the whole area so that it gets good coverage. I'm not looking to make it 3 inches, deep or even 2 inches or an inch. That's not what I'm after. What I'm after is trying to make sure that grass seed and soil, or in my case, compost, is always touching each other. You need the soil and the grass seed to be touching for it to germinate. So really, part of the reason that I mix it all together isn't just that I'm trying to save, from having the varmints, birds, and other critters come and eat the grass seed. I'm also trying to make sure that at all times, soil and grass seed are touching. One of the other benefits is whether you have a half inch, an inch, 2 inches, whatever you choose to do for a depth of that soil, there's grass seed at every level, every height. And so that, I think, solves a few different concerns. We hear often that you want to keep the grass seed moist. Well, when the grass seed's only on the top of the soil and the sun's beating down on it all the time, I guess the good part is it's getting some sun, right? The bad part is, well, it's hard to stay moist when the sun's beating down on the very top all the time. The fact that this seed is in different layers throughout the soil gives the ability for a lot of that grass seed to stay moist and have a better chance at germinating. If we consider just in the natural environment, seed is under the ground, right? It's not on top of the ground in most cases. And so I think this helps a lot. I think another way that it helps is when those birds and whatever come, they're going to see what's on top, but they're not necessarily going to see what's mixed into the soil below. And I think, again, for me, bang for the buck, you get more seed soil contact, more moisture retention, and less of critters eating your grass seed. To me, that's a win-win-win. This section was probably the worst because it gets the most sun in my yard. However, my front yard got a few bad spots, and the backyard definitely a bunch of bad spots. So I have a lot more to do, and basically you repeat the process the same all the way through. Shovelfuls, handfuls, sift it in, drop it in, get down, hands and knees and rub it into the soil. Make sure you get a good level playing field, if you will. Make sure that any of the bare spots are covered. And remember, I mean, you're going to miss some spots. I can tell you, you'll see later on in the video that it's kind of the after that I'll show you that I missed a bunch of spots and I'm going to have to go back and do them. You'll also notice if you use compost like I did, you're going to have chunks of bark mulch. You can have little stones, pieces of glass, things that come from God knows where, but they just end up. And so after the first watering or the first rain, I go out there and I pick them and kind of screen it myself. It's an extra step. You don't have to do it. It'll certainly grow around there. If you're tenacious, I think you should do it. It's worth it. But again, if you don't, trust me, the grass is going to grow around it. All of our lawns have plenty of stones, plenty of sticks, plenty of twigs and whatever else in it. So I wouldn't overly sweat it. But do make sure, like I said, that you sift it in. The next thing that I do is I walk the yard. It's another extra step, and I don't think that you have to do it, but I do it, and I just sprinkle a top layer of grass seed the same way that most people do when they're doing it, and that's the only thing they do. So instead of it being the only thing I do, I make it the icing on the cake. And I put a top layer, just sprinkling it in each spot, and then I pat it in. And I pat it in sometimes with my feet, sometimes with my hand. It's a myth that you can't walk on freshly planted grass seed. You can. You just can't walk on it after it begins to germinate, because then you'll pull out the roots. But in the beginning, you actually want it to be pushed into the ground a little, so that way when you get a heavy rain or you water too much, it doesn't wash away. Also, another important benefit of doing this that I almost forgot, and I'm glad I did remember, a lot of people like to put pre-emerging, crabgrass preventer or any such things like that. You can see in this photo, there's some dandelions. They are technically on my next door neighbor's lawn. Nonetheless, a number of dandelions and some other weeds crept into my lawn this year because last year the lawn took a beating. The number one weed preventer in all lawns is a thick, plush lawn. If you don't have spots for weeds to grow, they won't grow. And so the reason why I always overseed and the reason why I fill in patches like this is because you know what? The best way to keep weeds out is to keep grass in. However, when I put down a weed preventer, or if anybody puts down a weed preventer, if you're using something that's pre-emerging, how do you put down grass seed and expect it to grow when you know that weed preventer is going to prevent your own grass seeds from growing? And the answer is you put soil on top, because the compost that I use, or the soil that you'll use, or compost that you'll use, has not been contaminated with the weed preventer. That's below it. And so the soil that it's going to be touching and the soil that the grass seed is going to be germinating in is separate from that. And what this allows you to do is weed preventiveness as well as grow grass at the same time. This way you're not waiting until September or October and dealing with patches throughout your lawn that look terrible all season. So the grass seed that I'm using says 10 to 14 days for germination. Let's hope that that's going to be the case. But hopefully within 2 weeks, we'll have some green peach fuzz on there that will hide all these yucky looking bare spots. And with any luck, 3 or 4 weeks later, we'll have nice, fresh looking, tall grass. And I'll actually be happy because it'll be new, great looking grass. All right, wasn't a lot of fun. It was about 5 wheelbarrow fulls, and this is a big wheelbarrow. But I'm just doing kind of a walkthrough just to show you each of the spots that I've done. And, you'll see the spots that I've missed, and you'll also see the twigs and rocks and some of the good and bad of the project. And of course, like any other project, you're going back to fix it up as you move along. However, I did finish most everything here. I'll probably end up having about a half a wheelbarrow full to go around the lawn and just fill those little spots here and there that I missed. But overall, very, very happy, because in my mind, in 2 weeks, things are going to start looking good. Another thing that I forgot to mention earlier, and I'm glad I just remembered, I always plan to do this at a specific time. I watch the weather. The recent weather was showing that I was going to have, in the next week, almost not a complete rain out, but some kind of rain almost every day during that week. There's nothing worse than watering your grass every day just for spots, because the rest of your grass doesn't need it. You don't want to overwater the rest of your grass, so that way you can keep the grass that you need watered, the new grass seed that you need watered, moist. So for me, I like to let rain do it. So one way or another, if it's going to get overwatered, might as well let Mother Nature do that. And so I'm not worried about it. Like literally, by the time this rain goes away, which like I said, it's going to be about 5 to 7 days, I'll have somewhere around 7 days of moisture. It's early spring, and so it's not going to dry up quickly. And with any luck, in the next 6 weeks, 5 weeks, maybe even sooner, my lawn will be looking like this again. I sure hope so. Boy, does that look nice. All right. If you've enjoyed this video, definitely like it. If you'd like to subscribe, that'd be great too. And if you have any questions on gardening or lawn care, you can always ask a question and I'll do my best to answer. Thanks again for watching, and I appreciate it.